Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wake Up Missoula. I'm your host, Scott Ramp, here to usher you into the new, it's a new day. It's Friday, May 15th, middle of the month, farmers market, people's market, all the types of outdoor activities are happening all weekend long. It's the 50th anniversary of the Maggots, which is the Missoula premier rugby team. They're hosting their big festival this weekend, so it's Maggot Fest. And it's basically their 50th anniversary, so it's going to be a big one. I was driving by there just the other day, and I saw there was quite a gathering up on Thursday. So this whole weekend is going to be filled with all sorts of fun things like that. So shout out Jake and those people over at the Maggots to be doing their thing. All right, so as we dive into some city council, Midtown Commons, once again, or Riverfront Triangle, is up for approval in the next steps to build a hotel, conference center / trail / park expansion on the northwest side of Orange Street Bridge. The city also proclaimed this month as Mental Health Awareness Month and ALS Awareness Month, otherwise known as Lou Gehrig's disease. The city started with public comment on items not on the agenda. While some are critical of the city's spending, others use this opportunity to bring awareness of things going on in the community. Suzette Dussault, community member, is concerned about those Midtown Commons, and she's been coming pretty frequently for the last 6+ months.
Regarding Midtown Commons, or whatever we're calling this now, that's 13 acres that will be developed for profit housing, for market rate housing. And again, I'm stunned by the city in allocating our few precious resources for market rate. When we have a critical need for housing for our workers and our community. So I ask you to go back to the drawing board and to look at what the possibilities are that you could imagine that will provide worker housing.
All right. And so, the city has always had the big picture in mind of utilizing this space and activating it for the purpose of housing in general. She has spoken many times and with many MCAT videos where folks in the community met with city and developers on this, which the city has made up their minds on teaming up with the developer Miramonte to build more housing with emphasis on new park with funds generated from this project for affordable housing options elsewhere. Carrie Schreiber has also been at the beginning of this before Miramonte was considered after using TIF to purchase the property adjacent to the Southgate Mall. And this is what she had to say.
We are already a neighborhood and we're really dependent on that space. Please, when you make a park, do something that will serve the whole neighborhood. And we've had endless conversations about this in the time since. So we went from this plan that the developer brought that has some great key aspects. There's a beautiful waterway, greenway for the bike park into this park, a lot of green space through here. But the final one that you all will be voting for is here. And they're still using the language. There's a lot less green here. They're still using the language of a nice greenway from the bike path. But when I look at it, it looks like the waterway is culverted and the trail is through the parking lot of a 4-story condo building. So that's a little bit confusing to me why that is supposed to be inviting for the 1,000 people that live on the other side of the tracks to access that park. It really makes it look like it's more of a private park.
All right, and that was her reflection on some of the more modern, updated view of what the park's going to look like. I'm going to have more on this on the community meetings, but Mayor Andrea Davis speaks on affordability and the larger plan behind this particular property sale.
Folks, go back and watch the Missoula Redevelopment Agency presentation or come to the Land Use and Planning Committee on Wednesday. You'll hear the staff presentation in which attainable housing, and I think people get confused between what's affordable. And I can tell you, after a career in affordable housing, it is confusing. Are we talking about deed restricted affordable housing like the City Council funded this evening with home, CDBG, and Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars? Or are we talking about encouraging lowercase affordable housing, in which case is not necessarily deed restricted, but is attainable to the workforce? Something that was said during that meeting, and I just want to make sure nobody leaves confused tonight, is that this housing is absolutely intended for the workforce. What was said at that meeting is that workforce housing program through the Missoula Redevelopment Agency won't be used to subsidize the housing units. I just want to make sure I say that tonight. I will say that again at our Land Use and Planning Committee, and again at the 18th when we're back in front of City Council council for final approval. But it is a really important note to make because it certainly is for our workforce.
All right, so the concept of attainable versus the workforce housing, which workforce housing falls into a checkmark kind of things, while attainable housing is a little bit more about the city and how they're going to be scaling all the property place types from townhouses, apartment complex, condos, to single dwelling houses that they plan on building on that site. I'm going to actually skip ahead to the committee meeting on land use and planning since we're still on that topic, as they spoke during the land use and planning committee meeting. In particular, is talking about the Midtown Commons, and as you heard from the beginning of this particular city council meeting, is they're thinking about big picture and the cost of locals in the area, saying that the city is not doing enough for affordability. This meeting was scheduled from 1 to 3, but it went on until about 4 o'clock. So Mayor Andreas kind of talks about goals, and this is continuation of what she was talking about on Monday.
Many of the outcomes that this project achieves, which includes improved connectivity, expanded park space, housing, and reinvestment in Midtown, were identified more than 2 decades ago in the Urban Renewal District 3 plan. And in 2002, the Urban Land Institute studied this area and concluded that this is where the most intense redevelopment in Midtown Missoula should occur. But I do want to be clear that the proposal that we are bringing for you today is not the most intense development allowed under the zoning code, under our development code, or even what was presented to the city as options to bring before you. It is a project that we believe strikes the right balance, one that is compatible with the neighborhood. It achieves what is achievable in today's market, and it is capable of delivering meaningful public benefit.
And for the most part, a lot of it has to do with the bottom line of, providing more housing stock to have a bigger market for people to buy from. Regardless of the framing, this is a long term coming. It is for the city to bolster larger Midtown master plan. The magic word is middle income housing from apartment condos and single family homes, making this the perfect mix of housing according to the city. Grant Keir, Missoula Economic Partnership, spoke about this as well, and this is what he had to say. Where did I put that? Hold on a second. I lost the clip. Let's see. Hold on one second. I just got to find it. Okay, here he is.
This deal and on this idea was the fact that we are in what many are describing as a housing crisis. And one of those landowners is a major business owner in town, and they are also facing some of the same challenges that many of the businesses that we support face, which is that they have vacancies and jobs that they want to fill, but oftentimes the people who are wanting to take those jobs can't afford a home in our community. So they were motivated in part to work after 20 years on a sale together in concert because they wanted to see the city move quickly to address this challenge and redevelop this site. Our second role was really about once the site was acquired by the city and everybody wanted to move forward, we work with the city. And I think the easiest way for me to describe this in sort of like terms that are easy to understand is we're almost like a search firm. So we don't decide what the job description is, and we don't hire the employee. What we do is we try to go out and tell a lot of highly qualified employees that this is a great firm to work for, and there's a really good job at hand, and get them excited about proposing themselves to do it. So,
all right. So Missoula Economic Partnership facilitated the connecting with the city and Miramonte moving forward with this. And now, here are some of the actual ideas, and this is Annette Merchuso, from MRA, talking about what to expect from these particular designs. Wait, hold on a second. Let me see if I have that right. Okay, here we go.
A site plan that is proposed, and I think we always need to bear in mind that these processes begin with usually a master plan that is a very high-level concept, and then get more granular as details get filled in. So you probably will you probably will see that this plan has evolved from the very first plan that was presented in the developer's development agreement. But the concepts are quite similar. They've just become more granular as they've gotten reality. So to orient you to this image, north is to the top, and site plan again, please. On the site plan, north is to the top. Bob Ward's is right up at that white big building at the top. You'll see Johnson Street is being proposed to extend from the roundabout at Mary Avenue, which is just to the north of this graphic, all the way south through the site to connect with Eaton Street and then connect it to McDonald Avenue. A really important north-south connection in this area that's really lacking. And
right, and as you can definitely see here, there's definitely a lot of property things happening. If you've been to Bob Ward's and Sons, you can see the road kind of goes to nowhere as it curves right into Bob Ward's and Sons. And part of this is just the expansion of this particular road, because there's no roads next to the train track on the other side, as opposed to the Bitterroot Trail, which are meant for bikes. All right, so as we go a little bit forward in this, pretty much on par with city development, the larger buildings buffering the trail and the road extending from Mary Avenue through the west side of Southgate Mall. Mary Davis talks about the missing middle. That seems to be the big selling point, and I noticed that that was one of the things that Miramonte representatives spoke about this, and talking about the concept of the missing middle, people who are coming here for nursing, finding a place that they can afford based on their salary, and this is what Mayor Davis said.
When we talk about missing middle housing, what we're talking about is that our zoning code until recently had segregated single dwelling homes, and we had areas where people could develop high density multifamily housing. But in between, the things that we used to see built in our neighborhoods, townhomes, smaller homes for purchase, condominiums, those things were really zoned out until you just approved the land use plan and the uniform development code. So that is fantastic. We will foundationally see some things start to change there. And
all right, and so that's just part of the many changes, the UDC and many of the things that the city has been pushing for quite some time. The goal is to have folks go into cheaper housing options to open the rest of the housing market for those looking to downsize or buy their first home. That seems to be the prevailing goal. The mayor and the city of Missoula use this mosaic approach, the magic word. The city tries to field as many of the citizens' concerns on this, but many were not convinced the city has done enough to tackle the affordability crisis. The first hour had the presentation. Second hour was addressing concerns before public comment even began. And Sarah Giuliani spoke on this, and she's been talking about this for quite some time, just as long as Suzette and Carrie Schneider. So this is Sarah Giuliani.
Yesterday at the Parks meeting, a board member said, and I paraphrase, quote, "I spent the morning down there walking the park. I felt I had to know more about it being on the Conservation Lands Committee. I would tend to agree with the letters that the area south of the park, which is where the Cottonwood Grove is actually a vital part of that area. If I lived in the neighborhood and I were losing that, I'd be very upset. Just looking at how that was left out, I believe that is a major oversight," end quote. And I feel like had the public input been included in the design, that wouldn't have been overlooked. And it sounds like the park placement came down to like a textbook formula, but we have these beautiful wild spaces in Missoula, and I just wish that maybe we could preserve a little bit of that in Midtown, because it is really important to the people there and to the wildlife there. So I don't know, Mr. Kimmerly, if that's an option to adjust the design, but
Yeah, but unfortunately the city had or the developer had no plans, and the city addresses the cottonwood trees, which is the trees in the natural area, as they are at the end of their lifespan, according to the city and folks within the urban forestry. Many residents were worried about this Missoula's big picture removing and obstructing the natural area in the small pocket of Missoula Midtown. The city was not convinced about protecting these cottonwood trees, as they don't really seem to hold any real reason to halt or pause development as a whole. The city, however, pushed this approval along for Monday for approval on the basis that they had their best laid plans to focus on building the park and market rate housing through developers Miramonte. And overall, the city aims to raise $7.2 million for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to help bolster urban renewal development and just continue all this stuff. And then, of course, reimburse them for their park once they finish the park. And that seems to be the prevailing goals of the city of Missoula. So as we're talking a little bit more about trees, it's a terrible segue, but Morgan Valiant, the ecosystem services for the city of Missoula, open space and all that stuff, he gives a rundown on the tree fees. So whenever a developer develops things, they're talking about upping the fees to about $1,025, processing, permitting, all that stuff for the purpose of planting trees, and then also cash in lieu of not planting trees. So this is what Morgan Valiant had to say.
We continue to expand our urban forest to take care of it, and a lot of that has to do with replanting. A lot of the new trees that we get within our community do come through development or redevelopment or of sites. Recently, when the city passed their new Unified Development Code, a new option was put out for developers for tree planting. There were always two options that were available. One is the developer plants trees as per their landscape plan and does that as part of their development, and they get their certificate of occupancies as they complete their landscape and boulevard improvements. There was also an option for the urban forester to allow, in certain cases where tree planting can't be done, cash in lieu mitigation payments. We rarely do that. The third option, and should have covered this one first because it's actually option one in the UDC, but the new option allows the city or the developer to actually pay the city's urban forestry program to add that tree planting site to their annual planting list, and then the city would plant the tree.
All right. So a big part of this is just, updating the UDC and making sure everything is up to code with this. And Mike Nugent talks a little bit more about this in more details.
People don't have to do it. Developers can still plant their own trees and take care of this the way they always have been. But for folks who've said this is a burden, I actually think this is a great program. One question I just maybe want the public to better understand. So if a developer finishes a house in a window that you kind of classified as the bad planting time, so maybe winter, let's just say, no planting time, I guess.
Yeah.
Can the developer get like a temporary certificate of occupancy until appropriate planting season?
Yes, and that is exactly what happens. We'll issue a temporary C of O, and they'll have to wait until nurseries release trees and the ground freezes. So sometimes you're coming back 6 months later to plant that tree.
All right. So yeah, this is just more of, dotting the I's, doing all that stuff just to kind of make it all work and all together. But as we move on further through the meeting, the Unified Application Program, which is a lot to do with CBDG, block grants, all affordable housing, updating old buildings to be more ADA compliant. These are kind of like the funds that are used kind of like as a leverage, as a tool the city could use federal grants to help improve buildings, restore them to their glory, while also retaining the residents of there. And Kendra Lysum, Community Development, talks about their money.
This slide shows the breakdown of funding requests we received and the amounts that we have available in each funding source. We have two methods for matching our funds with projects that address identified community needs. The primary way is through a formal application and scoring process. This year, the scoring committee reviewed applications for the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund and HUD CDBG funds. The scoring committee included 4 community development staff, a city permit coordinator, two city council members, and a representative from the Affordable Housing Resident Oversight Committee. We reviewed 13 applications and scored each based on a rubric that includes things like project design, outcomes, and financial feasibility. Some of our funding, like home and home ARF, just don't mix well with our competitive round because of the narrow focus and the complex compliance requirements that come with these grants. So we use community identified needs to match this funding with appropriate projects. These needs are identified both in our funding allocation plans required by HUD and through various reports like our community needs assessment, our needs and gap surveys, housing partnership meetings, housing landscapes assessment reports, point in time counts, and things like that.
All right, and the last quote was Colleen Kane talking a little bit more about some more information on that as well. And we also have somebody from Homeward came up and talked about the importance of how these programs help Homeward. And this is Julie Pelvish from Homeward, who praises the city for these kind of funds to help keep their program and many of these affordable housing options open.
And I just wanted to take a moment tonight to thank the city staff firstly, but the council committee and all of you on the council for your thoughtful consideration of limited resources and great need in our community for these grouped funds together. So we are incredibly appreciative of that consideration and the continued funding for the various projects that we have put forward over the years and this year particularly. So I'm going to urge you to adopt the resolution that's before you this evening. It's going to continue to help us maintain the affordability and health and safety of over 196 homes in our community in the coming year.
All right, and this is another big push for the city of Missoula, as if you haven't already heard already, that this is going to be $1.5 million allocated for affordable housing programs like the CBDG, Block, Home ARP, and all that kind of stuff. So it's just it's like a spider web of federal grants writing to compete with other communities. Any refused money will go just somewhere else. So this is why federal grants are such a competitive use it or lose it kind of thing. And towards the end of the meeting, the city moved to authorize 3 new employees for municipal court. Their jobs are to make sure people get contacted for jury duty, trial, and many other services related to the court system. Missoula is growing, and the municipal court is long overdue for funding and efficiency updates. Luckily, this won't cost any more as they're budgeted for these new FTE employees. So much. There's so many people who are stuck in jail simply because they fail to appear in court, even for minor infractions. So city climate conservation of parks were into committee meetings as they seek approval for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to accept land and water conservation fund grants to help develop the park on the North Scott Street. So this has been a kind of like a long process. I think they've been talking about it for about a year plus. They're talking about acquisitioning, selling some of the land, acquiring some of the St. Mary's cemetery, and then leveraging some of the land to help fund these kind of projects, which we move forward with this one. Lucy Rumler, the project manager for this particular park, gave a brief presentation on this, and this is what she had to say, and kind of give you an idea of what the area is going to look like.
The Park on North Scott project is a joint Parks and Recreation Public Works CIP that includes the future park in the North Side neighborhood and street improvements on Scott, Rogers, Shakespeare, and Otis streets. This is a fast-growing area with some high-density residential, and there's gap in pedestrian and bicycle and connectivity, and a gap in park service identified in the Prost plan with the 10-minute walk or roll to a neighborhood park.
All right, and then of course, west of the park in this particular area was just recently annexed by the Urban Renewal District for the Roseburn Industries, and that's where Story House, movie theaters, movie productions is going to be, building more housing, using some of the acreage land, because for the most part, Story House is a movie business, but for the most part, they're kicking off with more of a real estate business to help back up a lot of their goals for arts. So a little bit of tidbit with that as well, but I also wanted to throw it back over to this has been a long time coming since they talked about the Villaggio, which is the subsidized housing through the Missoula Housing Authority at a $2.7 million cost. This is quite the investment, with $900,000 being deferred by National Park Services, $920,000 will be paid by the city, and they have the Parks District to lean on for funding these types of programs. Lucy also talks about what you see in these new parks, and just talks about many of the opportunities with this pretty large piece of land just in front of the Villaggio.
And we thought we might get some questions about, what is the bond paying for versus what is the grant paying for in the park? And the answer is it's kind of they contribute to most of the projects most of the amenities in the park jointly, and together kind of help us realize this complete park that was recognized in the Prost master plan. And so those components of a complete park that this park is going to have include social cultural elements, and it'll have a shade pavilion that's rentable for birthday parties, neighborhood meetings, walking trails, also a dog park where you and your dog can socialize. Play experience, it'll have a playground, and then depending on how bids come in, we're hoping we can also have a water feature.
All right, so yeah, there's just a lot of different options there. It's a big enough park where you're going to be able to utilize all sorts of different kinds of elements overall. PROST, or Parks and Rec Open Space and Trails, was created through the UDC to actually it was created before the UDC and as a way to encourage more parks and green spaces, and using some of the park district funds to help leverage developers to build green spaces and parks. Public Works is also aiming for the Missoula Cemetery to ban drones over their properties. So, you know, if you wanted to do an unmanned drone, fly it around, have some fun, use some public spaces here in town, the cemetery does not like that, and they don't want you to do that anymore. And part of this also has to do with the fact that they wanted to curb that and just work with that about unmanned drones and whatnot. And so for the most part, you know, here is Katie Emery from the Business Operation Manager for Public Works, talks a little bit more about this as well.
You know, we want to keep the property and its visitors in a serene place as they're visiting their loved ones. And so we want to prohibit that use unless they get permission by the cemetery superintendent. That language did come out of the parks ordinances, so that is already in place in parks and trails. And then we're also coming forward with an ordinance change to allow for vaultless green burials. The City of Billings has been doing this for quite a while, and we had a new cemetery board member who had expressed interest in us providing this service. So it's a new option. And so we just had a small change to make in our ordinances, and both.
All right, and so yeah, just a couple small changes, making sure things, you know, you just never know. That's the thing is about government. A lot of times, a lot of it's reactive, and you never know if someone was flying a drone in the cemetery and being like, okay, this is really annoying. I'm trying to, you know, have some peace and quiet while I visit my dead relatives. And it's not an outright ban, but one could require basic communication to the people at the Missoula Cemetery. Fort Missoula has always been a great place to fly drones, so some ideas there. So let's talk about Reserve Street, because Reserve Streets is quite a big thing and took up the last half hour of the hour-long committee meeting for Public Works. And Charlie Manafee, Transportation Planner, talks about getting into the Safe Streets and Roads for All program to help fund and secure funding for Reserve Street improvements. And this is what he had to say.
There's many pathways that are allowed and included in this grant program, both planning, which funded the Reserve Street Safety Action Plan, but then also the opportunity to do demonstration projects and just hard infrastructure implementation projects. And our application would be a combination of implementation and demonstration. So I'll be diving into how that would look in our application. It does require that all projects have a local match. And then our closing date for this grant is coming up quite quick. So this has been a fast-paced grant for us.
All right. And so, yeah, that's just one of let's see, Clark Fork River Bridge and north off of 7th Street, with some of those merged lanes from Broadway being more problems to safety issues off Reserve. The list is long and the process has been very long. Overall, this will take us into winter 2027, and the action plan was approved in March, and the momentum is moving forward with Reserve Street. Missoula got $12 million under the same grant for South Avenue and are looking to take advantage of federal grant programs. The range of spending for Missoula, they want to spend $200,000 to $250,000 is their range, with a cap of $250,000 as their matching for these grants. And like he was mentioning in that last clip, had a lot to do with adding the 20% of the initial funding. So Charlie also talks about how they're going about improving Reserve Street's most dangerous intersection. And this is what, let's see, he had to say about that.
We're applying quick builds, sort of low-cost construction methods across all of our sort of priorities and ways of putting projects in the ground. So we plan to do subtle redesigns to American Way River Road, the International Drive and Stockyard Road intersection, and then Old US 93. And these are the highest priority sort of recommendations coming out of the plan based off of their crash history, and then also how those crash histories can be directly addressed by construction redesign through these quick build design approaches.
And of course, one of the biggest areas of concern is between the Reserve and Mullen and Reserve and 3rd Street lights, as the road becomes winding up and down, all that kind of stuff. And most people start going about 55 in a 45 mile per hour zone by default. Clark Fork Bridge and north off of 7th Street with some of these merged lanes from Broadway are being more problem to safety issues off Reserve, you know, the ones without street lights. This list goes on and the process has been very long. Overall, this will take us into winter 2027 for final design approval with updates with the streets for temporary solutions. So they have a couple temporary solutions that they could implement almost right away, and then they can take it away in case it becomes even more problematic or causes some issues. So this is a way for them to actually have active moving forward. Because when you're talking about a major Reserve Street roadway that connects I-90 to Interstate or Highway 93, you have two major interstates, all federally funded, all that kind of stuff, and then you have a major street that connects them to, which is definitely controlled by the Montana Department of Transportation. So you have to not only be compliant within the local city, county, the state, but also potentially even the highway division of the federal government for these things to move forward, which is why most of the time when you have these kind of areas, you know, I'm going to pick on Lolo. You know, Lolo is one of the few places that are really kind of like a city centered around their highway connection off 93. You know, some towns have a breakaway where you can actually go through their downtown and off the highway. Lolo is one of those unfortunate communities which actually is living off the highway, and they have to reduce the speed limit quite a bit, but at the same time they also have some speed issues in that particular area, and not much like Reserve Street, which is a very busy street as people are basically transferring from one highway to the other, not knowing that they're going just as fast on the highway as they are on Reserve Street. So that's a big problem area for a lot of people just coming through Missoula, even if they're not stopping here. All right. So that's pretty much it for my city council report for you guys. I have some new programs airing on MCAT. Here are some of the new programs, and these are the programs that any organization here in town are more than entitled to ask and request MCAT to do recording. We get requests all the time, so if you are a nonprofit organization or civic group here in town and you want MCAT to come out and film your event, 90% of our stuff has a tendency to be people talking in front of a slideshow, but we have some great programs airing this weekend, including the For History Buffs and also our own gaming show, MQuest, sponsored by MCAT. So if you get a chance, you should check that out. And all these are available on our MCAT YouTube page. Episode 2 of Dread's MQuest is going to be available tonight at 6 p.m. And we're going to have 4 episodes premiering every Friday until the end of this month. So take care, and here is Megs.
To patronize a Chinese vegetable gardener is as bad as to patronize a Chinese laundromat when there is a boycott going on. Try and economically drive the Chinese from Montana by withholding non-Chinese dollars to their businesses. And this happened over and over and over again. So did it work? No, if it needed to happen over and over, the Chinese resisted. Right? The threat of a boycott, though, could go a bit further and become actual violence. Right? There is always the threat simmering underneath the surface for the Chinese in the American West that things could get bloody. It didn't get terribly bloody here in Montana like it did in Rock Springs, Wyoming in 1885 with the massacre, or on the border of Idaho and Oregon in 1887 where 37 Chinese were killed, but that threat is always present. Right? So we've got boycotts that happened here in Missoula, definitely happened in Billings, Butte, Anaconda. We've got taxes and laws that were specifically designed to undercut the Chinese gardeners' success. So there'd be taxes specifically in Butte. If you're driving a certain type of cart, you'd have to pay this much, and that tended to be the cart that the Chinese truck gardeners used.
Help with what? And send all 4 of them? Do any of them go through?
Should we call the police? Oh, wait.
Well, you see that they you get like 1 bar, and they do go through.
Well, we could just wait to see if he texts back.
Call? Oh, no.
I need to be start cleaning building anyway. I will head over. I'll go back with you. We split the park. I'll go back with you.
We could ask the bartender, do you have a landline?
You know, it hasn't been working almost all day. Every time I try to connect. But I mean, earlier when we had that fight in the bar,
have you tried turning it
I
off
tried
and
to
on
call
again?
911, and I did get through. But it was the weirdest thing. When I told them that, like, the people were brawling in the bar, they said that they were overloaded and that they'd try to send a cop car, but they didn't know if they'd be able to, and that I should just be patient.
What are our taxes going to?
Hi, I'm Tammy Baldovic. I'm with the Roxy Theater. Happy birthday, Allie. I just have a kind of a nuts and bolts question. What are your minimums for a donor using the Montana Endowed Tax Credit?
I can answer for me and Claire, since we hold Claire's endowed fund at the Montana Community Foundation. Our minimum for a Montana Endowment Tax Credit qualifying gift is $2,500, if that makes sense. So it has to be at least $2,500 gift, and that will result in about a $900 tax credit. So the cost of the gift is actually less than $2,500.
They say they fell in love with a wounded animal. They fell in love with a wounded animal. They fell in love with a wounded animal inside you. It'll rain all night. Piles of gold. And even though I'm blind, I can see your love. Does it feel? Does it fall? Just miles away. I can see your love. They fell in love with the wounded animal inside you. They fell in love with the wounded animal inside you. They fell in love. They fell in love. They fell in love. They fell in love.
Yeah, some great programs that you guys can watch on our MCAT YouTube page at MCAT TV Missoula. And as always, you can watch me on my YouTube page, Wake Up Missoula, which also includes this next segment, Pre-Critic, where I prejudge a movie based on nothing but my biases towards movies in general because they all kind of feel the same. Obsession is a welcome genre into the world of be careful what you wish for. Fatal meets Fatal Attraction. Some guy who has a crush on a girl wants her to fall in love with him, so he makes a wish, and like any AI girlfriend becomes problematic in their attempt to tear you down to provide the lone source of love, because obsession, like this movie is called, always has to do with the alienating your family, your friends, in an attempt to get the guy all to yourself, and the girl in this movie gets to play the crazy girlfriend fantasy that most weird guys will use as a pretense to slide into her DMs in real life. Enjoy a horror movie about a manipulative girlfriend, and it's a guy's fault for wanting this kind of attention with little effort on his part. Of course, then we move on to In the Gray. So spies doing spy things. It's this typical action thriller where it's like no spy can really trust each other, but they all have to team up in the end and betray the big thing. I don't know. I've already seen this movie before. I think they did it with Ryan Reynolds and The Rock and Gal Gadot with the movie Red. And Mr. and Mrs. Smith, where you have two kind of like main characters who have this tension, and then you add a third element of chaos of a spy who's just like, I'm just here, but also the best character ever. While you two are busy, will they, won't they, I'm just doing spy stuff. I'm actually here to do my job. So that's kind of what I expect from this movie. And then we have Is God Is. So two sisters listen to their mother to kill their father for all their problems. Their problem is that the mother-daughter was set on fire, but the other daughter is just kind of along for the ride. So watch as they cross-country their way to their deadbeat daddy in this Deep South odyssey. Yeah, pretty much it. Then we got Driver's Ed, basically a coming-of-age movie where a kid wants to hook up with his girlfriend or something like that, but he doesn't have a driver's license, so he has to co-opt his student driving ed car to get to the place where he needs to be. So it's kind of like a quasi-road trip.
stealing a car, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. But of course, sounds like a bad afternoon TV special, but it's played as a comedy, so the love will always find a way since his girlfriend broke up with him, but he has to go to his ex to prove his love to her, which in today's age, yeah, not going to work the same way you think it's going to work. Magic Hour. A bored housewife deals with the fact that there is no magic in her relationship and must get her groove back. This one uses a lone home in the middle of the desert. Hey, you know, the guy buys a house, it's probably cheap, but it's in the middle of the desert and there's nobody else around. And then they just have to figure out whether they actually like each other for the long term. So here's Magic Hour. Then we have Life Hack. So you like those movies, the movie Hackers, but you want to do it a little bit lazier, like The Social Network. So this one's more about everyone from the perspective of the screen. You know, so maybe you've seen a movie where somebody who's like in front of a screen the whole entire time. Ice Cube did the movie with War of the Worlds. Chris Pratt did it with his movie where he has to prove his innocence. This one's more about a group of kids who are just like, we're hacking the man and we're stealing all their money for progress and things and evil billionaire CEOs. So Life Hack, this is what you can expect from this movie. Then we got an anime. You know, I grew up with, I guess, Toonami, and I really did like the Gundam Wing show, but this one's called Gundam Wing, or Mobile Suit Gundam Hathaway, The Sorcery of Nymph Cirque. That's a mouthful. If you like giant robot fights, but are more interested in convoluted plots around robots where they talk about drama and love and Spy, Cloak and Dagger, and the thing, and this sequel movie, so this was from a previous movie, this sequel movie probably never watched or heard of, so think of this as a Japanese cartoon with government intrigue with consequences of a global war against space people. I mean, for the most part, it's like space Nazis invade Earth, and then the space Nazis are like, hey, you guys are the real Nazis. Like, oh, wait, we kind of are. Wait, you guys are doing terrible things. And then there's no really good guys. It's everyone just kind of fighting each other. And that's the cool thing about it. That's a weird thing. Anyways, up next, we got a new Dubbin Stuff for you guys. This is from the 1945 movie, The Scarlet Clue.
While you're out there at the hot dog stand, ask if they have any hamburgers. I know they don't sell hamburgers, but come back here. Come back here.
What's going on?
There's a thing.
There's a thing?
There's a guy. He has like a face thing, and he looks like.
Might just be cosplay.
I don't know. He looks just looking there. He looks really scary, and I just don't know what to do about anything. So please, just believe me. Don't.
All right, I'll see what I can do.
Okay, just look at it.
Okay, don't worry about this. I got this.
Okay, you see, you're gonna see. No.
You see, I'm an actor. That's good enough for me. He was just very scared of, let me show my friend. That's not that scary, but, we should...
Not scary at all. Let's run.
Hold up there now. I'm just a rich Texas oil baron. We got science to do. Sir, we saw this really scary thing.
Yeah, I pooped my pants.
What? It's gotta be around here somewhere. There it is. Ooh, look. I see you doing some science around here. Hey, just your benefactor, paying all the bills for all these kooky devices. Is that a telescope? That's pretty neat. All sorts of cool things going on here. And so you put the mechanism right here, and then you turn them... Hold on a second. I hate to interrupt, but I was coming. Logan McOil. Well, that's me, and this is Toshi. He came from overseas. It's Toshida, but he calls me Toshi. And who's that guy? Oh, that's Warren. I owe him a life debt. Well, I brought Toshi over here because he seemed interested in some of your machinery. Everyone's interested in my machines. It's going to revolutionize the world. Whenever there's a revolution, there's always someone benefiting from it. Just happens to be Big McOil. You should be excited because I got something very groundbreaking that even Toshiba would love. Well, when you say groundbreaking to an oil tycoon, it's a kind of a big deal, and I'm excited to see what you got. All right, for my first invention, how do you feel about feeling awake without drinking coffee? Usually takes a little bit of time. I ain't much for coffee. I like that Texas tea, oil that is. I like all sorts of things related to oil, from bubbling crude to that one girl named Olive. I love Popeye. Well, a part of our engineering is using electricity to help mitigate pain and pain receptors in people to help with alternatives to medicine, from the very spark of life itself. Wow, that actually sounds very legit.
Right? It's crazy.
Why don't you guys take a look around? You might learn something. Yeah, come on, I gotta close an orphanage by 2. All right, this sounds like a great investment. Let me ask you this question. Am I doing finger guns right? I'm just a businessman. not a scientist.
After I saved McOil's life, you won't leave me alone. Are you going to get help? Because I need help.
What kind of device is this? Well, it's an MRI machine. It's a new kind of device that scans people without radiation. That ain't it the nuclear age? Yeah, but radiation would kill you and cause you to die and grow tumors and die and get cancer and do... Yeah, MRI is supposed to scan for cancer to see if you have it in your brain, but you're supposed to stay very still while you're waiting in that machine, which is basically lubricated through helium. Isn't helium a finite resource? We're not going to worry about that now.
Now, what kind of thing? Oh, jeez. Guys, help! Help! Guys, electricity! Things are happening! I need help! I'm stuck! Electricity's going to kill me! I thought I was supposed to help human race and light up light bulbs and stuff, but now I'm going to die! Help! Somebody help me! I'm stuck
all right,
here.
get out from there. It's fine, just walk. It's fine. Don't you worry. Grounded and connected to those orbs. Don't worry. I saved your life. I don't know what I'd do without you. You're my best friend, and I love you. Don't ever do that to me again. You gave me a heart attack. Electricity ain't no big deal. Maybe it's kind of a big deal, but still, you should respect it and just kind of don't touch too many things. Come on, thank you, scientist man. Time to buy the orphanage and kick all those kids out.
Hey guys, welcome back. That's pretty much it for some of my clips here. I'm going to go over some of the news things that are happening as well. Of course, this week, our own President Trump went to visit Xi Jinping over in China, their leadership, and just talking about things and investments and some of the outreach and some of the trying to connect the dots, and also kind of talking about trade and also the Iran war and dealing with the Strait of Hormuz issue. And just one of the bigger takeaways is the fact that Chinese President Xi Jinping was very adamant about letting Trump know is that they are an emerging power and that America is a power source too, and that they have a mutual respect, which is understanding, to have a mutual understanding that any kind of things that would happen, especially in the case of Taiwan, there would be some kind of mutually assured destruction. And they did a quick little history lesson about, I think it was Thaddeus, and had a lot to do with the rise of Sparta in the times of Athens when they were at their peak of their power, worrying about another nation state growing kind of right next to them adjacently and being very successful. So, Laura Lundquist broke a story about how the Trump era politics has resulted in less public land for wildlife. The wording of that the Bureau of Land Management stated that the definition of multiple use on federal lands does not include wildlife or habitat conservation. This prompted many groups to speak out. Montana public lands go hand in hand with nature and wildlife, just so happens to live there. But despite this, many people have come out to condemn many of these rules, looking to make way for Wyoming style of private land acquisition by reducing the means of wildlife protection. The public lands rule, which was approved 2 years ago by the Biden administration, and of course anything that Biden or Obama did, Trump quickly undid and got rid of as soon as possible. From the roadless rule to the big picture that the Montanans at odds with our political leadership, which for the GOP tends to skew towards Trump and his cronies' big picture. Montana depends on federal public lands, not just managed in Montana, but as a big picture to protect our natural public spacing. The rule, according to the former BLM Director Tracy Stone Manning, said that the rule would safeguard the health of public lands in 3 ways: protecting the best, most intact landscapes by restoring the lands and waters that needed, and by using science and indigenous knowledge to make the land decisions. Currently, 81% of the national system of public lands is open to oil and gas drilling, and approximately 60% is grazed by livestock, while only 14% is designated for conservation. Montana has always been a resource state for big businesses, and because of the 1970s convention, Montana was able to come up with goals to protect our natural world through the Clean and Livable Climate Clause. This and 98% of the people who support the public land rule are at odds with many energy backward programs like gas and coal initiatives under the Trump's drill baby drill policies. So ballots from the primary have been sent out to the state, is upholding the voting rule, which includes county election offices are no longer required to be open the Saturday before election, so they got rid of that, so people are able to pop in for Saturday registration. Voter registration in federal elections will continue until 8 p.m. on election day instead of ending at noon, so anybody can register at any time when they go to vote. Voter registration on Monday before election will end at noon, but of course, it has in previous elections. These are part of the greater push to mess with elections leading to the 2026 midterms. Montana courts paused these changes through Senate Bill 490, which aimed to change voting regulations. According to Montana Free Press's Tom Ludy, the ruling is partially a win for Indigenous and youth voters who said SB 490 would disenfranchise voters who haven't registered before Election Day. The lawsuit was brought against Montana Secretary Christy Jacobson and the state's top election official, suing to block the changes are 7 Indian tribes in Montana: Western Native Voice, American Civil Liberties, Union of Montana, Forward Montana, Montana Public Interest Research Group, and the Montana Federation of Public Employees. The court didn't block new voter ID requirements created by Senate Bill 276, another cuff bill, which was challenged in the same lawsuit. Senate Bill 276 requires in-person voting to provide photo ID plus some additional proof of address if their photo ID isn't approved. A lot of times your ID has your place of residence, but sometimes people move, especially if they're renters. And a lot of times people don't know that they don't have to update their driver's license and ID to reflect their new address, but for the most part, it is definitely one of the things that is highly encouraged by state and local officers. Making it hard to vote isn't always a good look, but gerrymandering armed race continues in states looking to break up districts in favor of party trends. South Carolina basically blocked their means to change their ruling, but Louisiana is a big one, as black voters and civil rights groups represented by the ALCU filed suit in federal court Monday charging the GOP-led redraw, which cracked the city of Memphis into 3 districts, initially discriminated against black voters in violation of the 14th and 15th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. So what happened in the major cities across the state get broken up into the point that the city doesn't attain the majority of the municipalities, as rural areas outnumber these places. Much like Missoula is separated from Bozeman, Butte, and many other Democratic-leaning cities off I-90, we're stuck with the red cities of the northwestern Montana that always lean red, from Thompson Falls, Polson, all those other areas. Manufacturer representation to avoid losing the blue no matter who, or voting red instead, become tailor-made to make it easier for consolidating power that lacks challengers. So the South is something that has always used these forms of politics to curb their districts for people like Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, and more GOP forever candidates to continue. Tennessee gerrymandering, which came after President Donald Trump directly pressured Governor Bill Lee, took the state maps from 6-1 Republicans to 7-0 Republicans in Tennessee. The complaint details the length in which the GOP lawmakers went to avoid acknowledging the racial motivation behind the gerrymandering, saying that the bizarre robotic answers to the most basic questions on the map, and that led to almost comical dishonesty. And as I mentioned, Lindsey Graham, his own base is also looking to get rid of him, as they've been posturing himself as a war hawk, going so hard in the unpopular war that is happening in Iran, and most notably the Strait of Hormuz blockage. Newsweek reports that South Carolina's seat is gearing up for their major race, with primary election looking to secure the 5th run in the midterms. However, with his politics and recent support for another country abroad, the United States has rubbed its base the wrong way. However you shake it, Trump supporters, candidates tend to get favor by other Republicans, and him losing his primary seems low. However, with more and more Democratic candidates becoming more favorable and actually meeting people at the more rural areas, many places like the southern states are a little bit more leaning that way. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a big change, but there definitely has to be somewhat of a seismic change for anything to actually really happen moving forward. And of course, I only mention this because Obama, number 44, has also made efforts to support Democrats through this season to bolster votes. We're living in a very contested time in American history where the GOP has all the power and yet has not made the cost of living any easier as they've promised. In Austin, Texas, Barack Obama showed support for James Tellerico, who ate tacos while addressing supporters and Texans about their campaign and plans for the upcoming election against GOP candidate John Cornyn, who has been at the seat since 2002. He is the counterpart to Ted Cruz, who is always in the news for something or another. Montana is opening our logging industry with approval of more than 144,000 acres of forest, according to the Missoula Current Laura Lundquist. Slightly more than 215 square miles have been logged or burned along the eastern side of Bitterroot Mountains from the northern boundary with the Lolo National Forest south of the West Fork on the Bitterroot River. Portions of the area bulge farther west along the various drainage, including Fred Burr, Bonded, and Lost Horse Creek, but the Lost Horse and North Lost Horse projects units go so far as to butt up against the Selway Bitterroot wilderness. More than 90% of the Bitterroot Front project is within the 250 highest risk fire shed identified in 2022 by the U.S. Department of Agriculture Wildfire Crisis Strategy. There's a lot of mouthfuls in here. Part of the project is that within the community protection zones, a region with communities and private land are considered at high risk of damage from wildfires, pointing to the Sharrow Creek Fire and the 2016 Roaring Mountain Fires. Anderson justified this decision by saying that the project would reduce wildfire risk to Ravalli County communities. However, reductions of forest seldom reduce the risk of wildfires, since hot, dry conditions contribute to fires more than the volume of trees. You live in a state that 95% of the time over the last 2 decades have declared a state of emergency in terms of drought, mostly made to support farmers and eggland. Public forest and land depends on federal programs for funding overall. So there's a lot of things and shenanigans going on here, and any time that they're looking to cut some funding here and there, a lot of those emergency response tends to be a big part of those cuts overall, because when it comes to emergencies, they happen once a couple times a year, as opposed to a year-long kind of things where federal government looks to invest in something that has long-term effects. And that's the issue, is like you're investing in something that may or may not happen. And I can see why the federal government, by the numbers, would cut those kind of funds overall. But we live in these areas, and we have to deal with the fact that fires are inevitable, and we can expect to see a fire at some point in the future, if not sooner rather than later. Heck, a couple weeks ago, we had that fire up Blue Mountain. It was a brush fire, but it was easily contained. But yeah, you just never know. That's kind of crazy things. But I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to ask you, hey, do you guys like rugby? Well, the MegaFest 50th anniversary is happening now through the weekend at Fort Missoula, and we'll have teams from all over the globe, totaling more than 40 different teams, with all the fun of rugby and bumping into each other to get to the goal. Imagine soccer rules, but with full contact sport, where you hold and rush the ball with the ability to pass backwards, only to punt forward with your team is basically pushed into your territory. New Zealand is the Premier League, and we can expect to see some great teams all weekend long, including downtown, being filled with a bunch of tough guys blowing off some steam. So look out for that as well. So that's pretty much it for that. I didn't want to talk too much about events because I have a lot of events and I'm pretty much running out of time. So I wanted to thank you guys for joining me, and this is going to be a great weekend. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend as well. And for Wake Up Missoula, I'm Scott Ramf. Have a good weekend.